Okay, good morning everyone and welcome to today's meeting of the Strategy and Resources Scrutiny Board. My name is Councillor Mary Harland and I'll be chairing the meeting today. We're continuing to use Zoom to deliver remote committee meetings, and like our recent meetings, we'll be on that platform today. The meeting is being broadcast live on Leeds City Council's YouTube channel, so a warm welcome to anyone tuning in through YouTube. We have 4 substantive items to consider today, covering a whole range of issues, including a report on White Rose Energy and the future of affordable warmth agenda, and how we can look to provide support to Leeds residents with heating bills. We'll look at how the council is incorporating social value into our procurement process to support local businesses and communities. There is a report on how we can do more for colleagues from the Black, Asian and minority ethnic backgrounds following the Black Lives Matter movement last year. And lastly, we continue to work on how the council continues to adapt and look at new ways of working and how we shape our buildings and estate in the years to come. As always, we have a number of guests in attendance to deal with any questions from board members, and to present these items, we've got a wide variety and substantive and important today, so we must be mindful of time. So I might ask to move on if we get a little bit bogged down in one issue. So at this point, I'd like to invite each member of the board to formally introduce themselves, please. And I'll start with Councillor Almas.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, everybody. My name is Gower Almas, and I'm one of the councillors for Beeston Holbeck Ward. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Peter Carlisle.
Good morning, Councillor Peter Carlisle, Carvely and Farsley Ward.
Thank you, Peter. Councillor Chapman.
Good morning, Councillor Diane Chapman for Rothwell Ward.
Councillor Firth.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Sam Firth, Harewood Ward.
Councillor Hayden.
Good morning, Councillor Helen Hayden, Temple Newson Ward.
Councillor Jenkins.
Councillor Jenkins from Killingbeck and Seacroft Ward.
Councillor McKenna.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, all. Councillor Jim McKenna, the Army Ward.
Councillor Midgley.
Good morning, Councillor Moran Midgley, Kippax and Methley Ward.
Councillor Robinson.
Morning, everybody. Councillor Matthew Robinson from the Harewood Ward.
And Councillor Simon Seary.
Morning, Councillor Simon Seary from the Pudsey Ward.
Okay, and now our guests, please, and I'll start with Councillor Lewis.
Good morning, Councillor James Lewis, and I'm Deputy Leader and Executive Board Member for Resources.
Neil Evans.
Good morning, it's Neil Evans, Director of Resources and Housing.
It looks like George is on now. George Munson.
Good morning, George Munson, also from Resources and Housing.
Welcome. Kieran Dennett. I don't think we've got Kieran. Sasha Walton. No.
Good morning, Sasha Walton, Leeds City Council Social Value Lead. Thank you.
Graham Sefton.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Graham Sefton from the Council's Human Resource Team.
And Mark Mills.
Mark Mills, Head of Asset Management. Good morning, everyone.
Morning, and welcome. Okay, so Debbie, can you take us through the first 5 items, please?
Thank you, Chair. So under agenda item 1, there are no appeals against the refusal of inspection of documents. Agenda item 2, there are no exempt items. Agenda item 3, there are no late items. Agenda item 4, could I ask members to declare any disclosable pecuniary interests? I'll take silence that there are none. And agenda item 5, there are no apologies. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, we've got some background noise coming on. If you could all mute when you're not speaking, please. Thank you.
Sorry, Chair. I think that might be my husband. He's on another call.
Oh, okay. Has he got anything to add to this meeting? Is he joining us all the time?
No, he does work for the council, though.
Oh, does he? Okay, we'll let him off. Okay, item 6, minutes of the previous meeting held on the 11th of January. Do members accept these as a true record? I'll assume correct unless otherwise. Matthew?
Thanks, Chair. I just wanted to seek some confirmation on 2 of the items. The first one was around WICA, and there was some information we were expecting about the monies for grants. The second item is related to MRP. In reference to the minutes, it says that the decision was taken in 2016. And I remember at the last meeting, Councillor Lewis saying that it had cross-party approval. I went back and checked, and I think it was 2017, and I don't think it had cross-party approval at the budget meeting. Can I just seek some clarification on that, if that's all right?
Councillor Lewis.
More than happy to clarify. It is received. The basis for me saying it received cross-party approval is there was no opposition amendment that had ever been submitted that suggested a different course in terms of how we meet our MRP requirements. So it was the absence of any opposition amendment that provided an alternative way forward that was the basis of my comments.
Who wants to take the question about WICA? Has anybody got any? Neil?
No, I don't have that information, Councillor Robinson, but we can come back to you, I'm sure.
Okay, thank you. Thanks, Neil. Okay, then other matters arising? No? Okay, then, so we'll move on now to, just on that, the letter that we sent back in September about adult social care funding, we're still awaiting a response. We've sent one reminder in January, but we're still waiting for a response on that. So we'll move on to item 7, White Rose Energy. This is an important agenda. Tackling fuel poverty and delivering more affordable warmth is absolutely vital and key aims in our best city ambitions. We only need to look at the recent weather to see how important it could be for families and residents throughout the city. So, George, can I now hand over to you to do an introduction, and then I'll take questions in the normal way.
Sure, thank you very much. So the purpose of the paper is to run through, I think following some questions in the November scrutiny, so run through a little bit about the background to White Rose Energy, why it was originally set up, and the events leading up to its closure, and then the impact on residents who signed up to it of the closure of White Rose Energy. So if I take you back to about sort of 2016 when we first set the company up, the purpose of setting up White Rose Energy was really to deal with some of the issues in the energy market at the time. So it's heavily dominated by the big 6 energy company with very little switching of customers, a very uncompetitive market with a real perception that people were paying well over the odds for their energy. So we felt that we should do something to try to intervene. We looked at a range of different options at the time. There was quite a lot of pressure at the time for us to actually go all the way and set up our own energy company, but we felt that that was a very risky proposition, given that we had no experience of trading in this market. So following a market testing exercise, we decided to run a procurement to set up something called a white label energy company. And a white label energy company is the sort of thing that you see with sort of Sainsbury's Energy or Marks and Spencer's Energy, RSPB Energies, something where a brand essentially uses all of the licensed functions of an energy company to market a particular sort of brand of energy company to its customers. So it's effectively a marketing proposition rather than an actual energy company, and that's a really important thing to bear in mind. So following this tender process, we struck a deal with Robin Hood Energy, run by Nottingham City Council, to establish White Rose Energy. So using our branding, but using all of the regulated functions of Robin Hood Energy. So that effectively gave us a way to push out an energy company to our residents and encouraged people to switch, and gave us a really good way to improve the voids energy service that we had to our tenants. So that ran for around about 4 years, successfully over that time. At the peak, we had around about 8,500 customers, individual customers, many of those with dual fuels with us. And our void switching service was switching typically between sort of 2,500 and 3,000 of our void customers every year. But during that time, the energy market changed fundamentally. So one of the biggest impacts was the introduction of the energy price tariff caps by the government, which, when they were brought in, energy prices were relatively low in terms of commodity prices. Commodity prices then spiked, and a lot of energy companies were left in a trap where they had a tariff cap set at a certain level. Their commodity prices then risen above that level, and we saw around about 16 energy suppliers go bust during 2019 and 2020. It's had a really big impact on Robin Hood Energy. They ended up in a position where they were losing money every year, despite being supported by the council. So Robin Hood Energy employed an external company to do a detailed analysis of their options, to look at ways to either continue trading or wind up, and they concluded that there was no way that the council could continue to support the loss-making business. So they felt the only option open to them was to seek a buyer. They communicated this to us in around about August or September of last year, and then asked us to sign a deed of termination, which we agreed to with a series of preconditions, basically around protecting our customers and our interests. So in the end, the sale was announced to the market on the 4th of September, and then concluded later that month. And Robin Hood Energy then worked to wind up all of their operations with all of their customers, communicated to and essentially switched to British Gas during October and November. Customers were free to move away without any kind of penalties, even if they're on a fixed term tariff, with the aim of essentially leaving no customers in the lurch, no customers without a supplier. So if people didn't respond to their communications, they were automatically switched to British Gas towards the end of November. So obviously there are some impacts on our customers, but the good thing was that we managed to negotiate some protections where British Gas confirmed that all of the rates were as good, if not better, than the rates that customers were on. There were no penalty fees, so if customers decided to switch away prior to the change or afterwards, there were no exit fees. They agreed to honour the debt management plans that were already in place with customers, and to try to set up debt management plans with those who switched to British Gas with debts. And as I've already mentioned, there were no customers left behind. And finally, Robin Hood Energy also agreed to honour the commission payments to us that were due to be made. So we received all the money that was due to be paid to Leeds City Council. There were some frustrations during the process. As we didn't own the customers, they were all Robin Hood Energy customers. We could not directly communicate with all of them as part of the conditions of the sale, that we didn't try to influence customers' choices, and we also weren't able to track what happened to individual customers. So early on in the process, we were liaising with Robin Hood before they laid off their staff, and after the initial marketing went out to customers to tell them of the options, around 90% of customers chose to switch to British Gas, but we didn't have a final figure in terms of how many had chosen to go with British Gas and how many had gone to other suppliers, unfortunately. And we also had the twin challenges of making sure that we put in place a void switching service to avoid leaving council homes in void any longer than we absolutely had to. So we rapidly engaged with the market and found a company, Energy Angels, who East North East had previously worked with did a market sounding and awarded a 1-year contract to them to effectively do the void switching instead of Robin Hood Energy, which we now know from having operated with them for the last, well, what, 3 or 4 months, is going very well. We're getting some excellent feedback from the voids team. So during the time with Robin Hood Energy, and with the White Rose Energy was set up, we had some real achievements in that we know that the tariffs that were offered were consistently lower than the default tariff cap. So we know that customers were better off switching than not switching. As I mentioned, we had around about 8,500 customers at peak, and we kind of plateaued at that stage for the last couple of years. Typically, customers were saving over £100 a year compared to the big 6 suppliers. So that totals up as around about £3.1 million of savings over the 4 years of White Rose Energy being in existence. We received around about £400,000 in commission payments directly into the City Council, which we used to part fund the service, but then we've also used to deliver direct energy savings and fuel poverty programs. So we contributed £50,000 to the discretionary fuel poverty fund, which provides emergency support to very vulnerable people. We've invested £30,000 in LED light bulbs for council homes, which are being installed as part of the void process. We contributed £15,000 to buying around about 14,000 trees to plant in schools and part of the Baby Week forest. And then we've around about £135,000 yet to be allocated. So it's lessons learned during the program. And one of the key ones is just how fiercely competitive the energy market really is. It's clear that energy companies have got to have extremely able management teams and have an extremely good approach to forward buying energy with a very large capitalization to allow them to buy the amount of energy that's required to avoid some of the peaks and troughs in energy commodity markets. We found that customers are extremely price sensitive. Even those who are kind of environmentally or socially aware are extremely price sensitive and are now switching quite frequently, which is a good thing overall. But the energy market is extremely political, and some of the decisions that government make can have a very significant impact on the operations of even very well run companies. And the partnership with Robin Hood Energy started off with a very clear set of objectives set by Nottingham City Council. But during the process of running the energy company, I think it's fair to say that Robin Hood Energy had to move away from some of those objectives simply to try to survive in such a competitive market, which means some of the procurements that we try to run to establish these partnerships, it's very difficult to set in stone the objectives that you're trying to work to. So just to wrap up, we've done a little bit of work looking at the options open to us in future. We could try to establish a similar kind of white label arrangement with White Rose Energy. We could try to form a kind of a looser partnership with an energy company. We explored a couple of options with energy companies. Nothing jumps out as being extremely attractive at the moment. Or we could participate in an existing collective switching service where we simply try to gather customers in and then market them en masse to energy companies to try to get a better deal. If we did that, we wouldn't be able to include voids within. It would just be a kind of a one-off auction. But in conclusion, when we've looked at the various different options, there's mentioned as part of your introduction that there's a real pressure on trying to tackle fuel poverty, particularly with midst of winter. The team's been extremely effective over the last 6 to 9 months in securing funding for installation of energy efficiency measures. So our preference now is to continue to focus on making physical changes to people's homes, and then over the medium term to have a look at what other options are available to us. So I'll leave it there and invite questions.
Thank you, George. It was a really interesting read, I thought, when I read through the papers. Any questions? Councillor Jenkins.
Hi, thank you, George, for the report. I sit on the Affordable Warmth Committee, and I hope we can take that. Alice Smart Councillor Smart is the chair of that, and I hope we can take this report to that. I've had some brief discussion with the Green Doctor scheme, and I'm sure they'd have some comments also on how we can tackle the issue of affordable creating more affordable fuel within the city and within the country as a whole. I mean, my experience working through COVID and so on is that we still have people self-disconnecting. We still have people who are struggling to survive, really. And I had a woman last week who's 58, had come from a refuge, and she was put into a housing association property with storage heaters. And within a week, she was calling out the emergency doctor because she was suffering so badly with the cold. She just couldn't cope. The storage heaters just run out of heat at about 8 o'clock at night, probably. And she was frozen. And the properties just weren't properly insulated. So we're going to try and see if we can do something with sanctuary housing to tackle that. But it is wrong in this world where we have in Liverpool have set up a right to food campaign across the country through Ian Byrne MP. We should have a right to fuel campaign as well, which should be a basic necessity that everybody should have the right to fuel, the right not to self-disconnect. And we're having to rely a lot at the moment on fuel vouchers, as well as vouchers for food from places like the Green Doctor and the Muddy Buddies to help people just survive. So I think the big six have failed. Privatization of fuel has failed. We need, and obviously the difficulties of setting up local fuel companies, even Bristol, I think, tried and it didn't work. But we need probably to set up a nationalized fuel provision to tackle the big six, to give people that right, which I think we should all have. And I suppose there is a campaign from the National Housing Federation and National Energy Action, I think that was set up in November, to look at fuel poverty. And I think perhaps we should try and link in with that as a result of today's discussion, try and see what we can do to influence government in its policies. Thank you.
So yeah, just to briefly respond to that, we are members of National Energy Action, have been for their lobbying aims to try to tackle fuel poverty as best we can. I mean, the case you highlighted is something that we are aware of, across the city. It's a really difficult situation where people often end up in unsuitable housing, and the services we have through the likes of the Green Doctor, I think are absolutely essential because they help to identify people and then help them through that kind of crisis situation. What you talk about in terms of the big six, it's an ongoing dilemma, to be completely honest, because we've got two different competing priorities. One is fuel poverty, which if we were to try and drive for fuel poverty, would be all about getting energy as cheap as it possibly can to help people to afford to stay warm. And then, of course, there's a climate change agenda where arguably you say, well, actually, we don't want to see energy that cheap because we want to encourage people to invest in ways to reduce energy use. So to kind of bring it all together, I think that the best approach we can take within the city is to focus as hard as we can on reducing the need for energy in the first place. So by improving insulation, by getting better heating systems in place to tackle the physical property, so that then nobody, whatever their situation is, ends up in fuel poverty. And that's what we're really keen to kind of try and drive on as our priority now.
Thank you, George. Neil, do you want to add to that?
Yes, I mean, just so I think clearly Councillor Jenkins will want to kind of pursue his arguments on a political level, but in terms of where we stand, we did take the view even years ago that it was too risky a venture to set up our own company. This did actually bring some real benefits, including to people who are on meters, actually, where we particularly kind of focused. But I think what George has summarised really is that intervening in this market is extremely difficult and really too fraught with risk, really, for local authorities. And actually, some of the disparities we've seen in terms of price and so forth have also somewhat compressed. And therefore, we have turned our attention much more to actually investing instead in better energy systems and in installation. It is very much a main plank, particularly of our HRA capital programme now. And there are around about 2,000 residents who've been moved off storage heaters as part of the district heating scheme. George has been involved in also doing other local schemes with blocks of flats which can't connect to that main district heating scheme. So there's a huge amount of activity going on where we are tackling fuel poverty by getting to the root cause of actually reducing people's need for inefficient energy to be delivered into their homes, by actually improving their homes for the long term, which I think, as George has also said, is also a key issue in terms of climate change too. So it's rather than a bit of a sticking plaster, it's actually dealing with some of the more fundamental issues.
Thank you, Neil. Thanks for that. Okay, I've got Matthew and then Sam and then Jim.
Thanks, Chair. I was reading through the documents and it appeared that Wakefield and Kirklees didn't sign up to this initiative, but Calderdale and Bradford did. I was wondering, is that the case? Could you just clarify that? And if so, why didn't they sign up?
Yes, yeah, absolutely right. We had partnerships with Bradford and Calderdale. Wakefield and Kirklees, we'd had conversations with. Wakefield came very, very close to signing, but for them, the key issue was that Wakefield and District Housing felt that it wasn't for them. So they felt that there wasn't a huge benefit to the council in signing up, because they would have only got a very small number of private customers joining the scheme. Kirklees were keen, but their energy environment team has just been stripped to the bone. So they had a list of priorities, and this never rose to the top of that. We communicated with them, but we didn't have them kind of formally as a partner to the project.
Thanks, George. Matthew?
Thanks, that's useful to know. Reading through the document as well, there's a lot of conversation about what's happened to the customers. I'm interested what's happened to the staff as well that were involved with this. And presumably they were working for Nottingham. I think it's clear from the documents there were no Leeds staff or Leeds Council staff involved, but just some clarification on if that's the case and what happened to them.
Yeah, so all of the staff were directly employed by Robin Hood Energy. There was around about 250 staff. British Gas didn't want to take on anything from Robin Hood Energy, essentially, other than the customers. So there might be one or two still working there, but they've essentially all been made redundant, unfortunately.
Okay, so the council didn't secure anything for the staff. It was just the customer base that were interested in them. Okay, the final point, Chair, and I know you're keen to look at time, and we might be able to come back to this if there is enough time. I'm slightly worried that this was a flawed business model from the start. I think in some of the lessons learned there, it mentions about how fiercely competitive the market is, and I worry that there's maybe some naivety going in, that people didn't think it would be fiercely competitive, that the big six were just going to be happy for people to muscle in to the market. Similarly, there's a slight contradiction in the document. On one hand, it says that customers don't switch, and that's why we needed this. On the other hand, it says that customers are very price sensitive, and 8,000 of them did switch. So I can't work out if that's a success or not, that we've convinced people to switch, which is a good thing. And surely, to Councillor Jenkins' point, we need customers that are across the city interested in what is the best rate for their energy, where their energy comes from, if it's from renewable sources, and how they can make their homes more energy efficient. as opposed to perhaps trying to muscle in and muddy the market and then risk losses and job losses as well through this.
Neil, do you want to come to that?
Yeah, I'll just say that actually we went into this eyes open, and actually, as George mentioned, we did actually get some interest within the city about trying to set up our own company like Nottingham and Bristol, and took a very clear decision that we felt it was too risky a proposition because of both competition and because of our own experience, or a lack of experience in what is a very competitive market. So that was a very deliberate position, and the questions were asked right at the beginning about what happens if things go bust. So that scenario planning was there to make sure that actually people would not be abandoned, would not be left without a supplier, would not be disadvantaged in terms of the price with which they were taken on. So, and what we were able to do in the period was take advantage of a lower price, particularly to offer to people on meters, as I mentioned, to actually give some advantage to people who generally don't switch at all. So we used a period of time which was advantageous without taking the risk of taking on a company with the losses which would ensue from that. I think what we would say now, I think, is that I don't think there is the opportunity to redo a white label with somebody else and get those same advantages for the reasons which George has set out. And clearly there are lessons more broadly for local government about intervening in markets like this in future.
Thank you.
Okay, Jim, your hand's gone down. Do you still want to ask a question?
It's been dealt with, Chair. Thank you.
Okay, Sam.
Thank you very much, Chair. And on that point, I think the epitome of it all is whatever the tariff that was kept or transferred over, the fact that British Gas then took over the contracts of those individuals does show you how competitive the market is at this moment in time, or the epitome of it to an extent. In terms of looking a bit deeper into the detail, obviously there's a mention in paragraph 3.2 about the situation that tenancies of the council at some point for council tenants were automatically started on White Rose Energy. Could you just give us a summary of what percentage or what sort of mass within the 8,500 peak, or generally within the regular numbers, were council tenants? And up to when were they actually, there's that policy of automatically starting them on Robin Hood Energy. When did it actually start and finish?
Thank you, Sam. George?
Okay, I won't have the precise dates to hand. So once we started with Robin Hood Energy, we had a period of time of just bedding in, getting the systems up and running. So it's about 6 months after we kind of formally struck the deal with them that we launched. So I can get back to you with the precise dates, but I think it was around mid 2017 or so that we started it, and then that ran through until April of 2020. We were doing council house void switching services. We didn't have the details on what tenancy the customers were. So we knew how many customers we had. We didn't often do the analysis of, are they private rented, by the owner occupied, are they by the council tenants. But we think of the customers we had, around about sort of 3,000 to 5,000 were council house tenants at peak.
Sam?
Thank you, George. Well, maybe if we could possibly if we don't have this information available, if we could find out how many tenancies were begun with White Rose Energy, that might be helpful if the council still holds that information.
Yes.
I think, sorry, carry on. Do you want to come back on that particular point?
Yes, so we do know that. We know how many people we switched each year, so I can find that out and provide that to you, certainly.
And do you mind me asking, you said April 2020 when it started. Can I just ask, at that point, was that the point at which it became apparent that Robin Hood Energy was in difficulty, or was it generally, or could you explain a bit more on that point?
Yeah, so that was directly COVID related. So at that time, Robin Hood Energy took a decision to furlough a lot of their staff, and told us that they could no longer take on provide a void switching service to us. We knew earlier than that they were in difficulties. They had delayed the publication of their accounts previously and had changed their management team. So we were aware that there were issues with Robin Hood Energy, and we were aware that they were running the management review over the summer. But because of the protections we had in place, we knew that there was no direct impact on our customers as a result of the difficulties they were in.
Sam?
That's it for now. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, Simon.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. It's more of a comment following up on the investment into our buildings. Neil is probably aware that obviously we've got 4 tower blocks in Rycross where the heating and as like David Jenkins mentioned, it inefficient, and the heaters are just, they're just burning through electric, and we need to make sure that we get our investment right as a council into these council properties. That could make a massive difference for many of these people that we're saying poverty poor. Thank you.
Thank you. Do you want to respond to that, Neil? Or?
I've corresponded with Councillor Siri on this. I am well aware of it. They are on the list. We have unfortunately 110 blocks or so, pretty much most of which need upgrading. We are getting through them quite rapidly, actually, but it's going to be a job which takes us through much, certainly, of the first half of this decade.
Thank you. Okay, I'm not seeing any more raised hands. I'm sure this is probably something that we'll keep on our to-do list. Obviously, when the new chair comes in, I'm assuming, George, you would be happy to come back and speak to us again when firmer plans are in place of going forward.
Of course, and we could probably roll in with some of the more sort of ongoing work on fuel poverty as well as just one of the angles that we're looking at there.
Brilliant, thank you very much. Okay, so thank you for those comments. As I say, we'll probably definitely keep this on the radar. So we'll now move on to item 8, which looks at the social value in procurement. As you know, that we've scrutinised this issue before, most recently in January 2020, which now seems a lifetime ago. So I know the council is looking to enhance the amount of investment we make in local SMEs and how we can add value in Leeds through our procurement strategies. It's a really positive agenda. Kieran, Neil, Sasha, can I hand over to you, please, to present the report? Who's going to lead? Sasha, it looks like you've come off mute.
I've come off mute. Thank you, Chair. So yes, it seems like a long while ago that this was at Scrutiny, but I've come on today just to explain what we've done since then, and we've done some great work. So we've created a really robust social value guidance for our commissioners, and this includes best practice, our list of social value champions that we have across the council, case studies on how social values has helped communities in other areas, our objectives, and also a step-by-step process of how to use social values in procurement. Also on the back of this, we've created a social value board, which is chaired by Neil Evans, and we're meeting in a couple of weeks. And in that meeting, we will decide what we want to bring with social values the rest of the year. On the 1st of April, we went into contract with Social Value Portal. The Social Value Portal are there to support us to deliver Leeds City Council's social value commitments. We've utilised the national TOMs, and these national TOMs are created with a social value portal. They use government green book, they use national statistics and other published research to be able to get to a set of TOMs, which is themes, outcomes and measures, to be able to for us to engage with our suppliers and the supply chain to get the best social value commitments for Leeds. So what we've done, we have bespoke those TOMs, and we worked really closely with all directorates across the council to ensure that everybody, all the directorates across the council have their priorities in there. We know exactly what their priorities are and what they're working to. What we did, we drilled that down to 6 themes, 17 outcomes and 58 measures. And you'll be able to see the TOMs on the appendix as well. So the social values portal and the TOMs really allow us to set targets. It allows us to evaluate the social value objectives that our suppliers have said that they will commit to. It will allow us to also performance manage them on the back of that. And it also provides really good live reporting, even down to community levels. So, for example, if the Councillor Oldham wanted to know exactly what was going on in her community, the portal can provide a map and it will show exactly what's happening in your individual communities. And then that gives us a really good idea of where we need to look and where we need to concentrate on most. So we have a threshold. So that threshold is that all contracts that Leeds City Council go into that are worth over £100,000 must consider social values. And if they don't, they need to provide a really good, robust rationale of why that's not happening. But we also have a light set of TOMs because we don't want to forget those contracts and the smaller ones under 100k. So we have a smaller set of TOMs which will allow us to get social values from all of our contracts. Like I said, so the portal monitors compliance across the council and help us do that. It shows specifically where social value commitments can be generated and where it's needed. And the social value portal, they're also providing us with specialist resource who provide us at any point with really good support, guidance and training. So as a council, myself and the people across the council worked really closely with social value portal, internal stakeholders and also our external partners. The TOMs are going to be reviewed on a yearly basis, and we're going to be reviewing them this month. And we're also involving the third sector in that review, just so that because those are the guys that are on the ground. They know what communities want. They know what work is happening in projects. So to really understand from those guys how they can help and their knowledge can help us best get those social value commitments. So we've trained over 120 staff across the council so far. We have 5 officers that are super users, and we have those licenses for the portal. And beyond this, we facilitated training and engagement sessions with our first sectors, our BCSEs, SMEs, and even the NHS, because we all want to work together really collaborative on this and get the best out of the suppliers and also the supply chain. We've mentioned SMEs, they're the ones that are struggling at the moment. They don't have the funds. So what we're doing, we're really supporting them. And what we're finding is the SMEs are getting a lot of benefits out of the reporting, and it's giving them better ability to bid for funds and that sort of things. So lastly, we also feed into the National Social Value Task Force, which lots of people come together and discuss social values and what it should look like going forward. Leeds was also asked to chair the Northern Regional Task Force, which we meet every quarter, and we have around 7 other Northern authorities that join us, We have a really good discussion about what's happening across each of our councils. We share best practice, we collaborate, and from that, we're also contributing to the Social Value Conference, which is on the 23rd and 24th of this month, which is absolutely fantastic, where we can go and showcase what Leeds is doing. And I've got a few more things to bear with me. And I'm also working on the moment a social value matrix in maturity index, which I'm going to share with you guys if you would like to see that. And also that's going to give us a really good idea of what we need to work on for the rest of this year. We've got around 9 contracts in the portal at the moment. So several of them are at award stage, which means that we don't have any recorded commitments. But what I'm going to do after this is get that reporting on those contracts that are in the portal at the moment, and give you an example of the social value commitments that suppliers are giving us at the moment, and what they've said they're going to commit to. So just to give you an example of a council that has been using social value portal a lot longer than us, and it's embedded, and of what great work that is possible if we really embrace social values at Leeds. In 1 year, created 561 apprenticeships, 1,579 jobs, 33,000 hours of volunteering, and also £107 million worth of social value commitments back into their local authority. And I would love us to get to that point by the end of this financial year, start winning awards, and just listening to the energy that was spoken previously. If we can use this really cleverly and get the most out of suppliers, we can start to bridge these funding gaps using social values and encouraging our suppliers and that supply chain to really give back to your communities that are suffering at the moment. We've also got COVID recovery toms, so I'm specifically going to be putting a lot of effort into utilising social values to help us with this recovery. Thank you for listening. Thank you for having me.
Thank you, Sasha. Did you say that you had 6 themes? Because the report says 5, or have I misheard?
16, 17 outcomes and 58 measures, but I will definitely clarify that for you.
Okay. Thank you. And I don't know if Debbie thinks it's a promotion or a demotion being called Councillor Oldham. No comment.
It was a shock, Chair.
I do apologise, Debbie.
That's all right. Debbie's the clerk, Sasha. Okay, Kieran, do you want anything to add? Anything?
Yeah, sorry. I think the only thing to sort of really re-emphasize is that there's been a lot of good work over the last few years with regard to social value. But what we've struggled with is drawing all that good information, good data together to be able to get the message out there exactly what we are doing. And so the social value portal will really help us do that. So over the last few years, I think what we have been able to report on is high level things like spend with local suppliers, and last year that was sort of 65% of our spend was with SMEs or local suppliers, which is really positive. But what we've not been able to do is up until now is really drill down and get that more detailed information. So social value portal will really help us to do that.
Brilliant. Neil, do you want to add anything?
Yeah, just to emphasise what Kieran said, really, this isn't a new agenda. It's something which I know Councillor Lewis has been pushing for many years, and we have had a lot of success with local suppliers, with apprenticeship schemes, with getting people into employment. I think over the last couple of years, about nearly 400 sort of people have been employed and given apprenticeships through procurements, which we've done. But I think, as Kieran said, what we haven't been able to do is properly present a lot of that because of the fact we haven't been gathering it. And I think it was probably fair to say that whilst there have been some really excellent examples, it's not been consistent right across every service. And this gives us the opportunity to really embed it within all of the council's procurements and make sure we're absolutely maximising it.
Thank you. James, do you want to add anything?
On top of that excellent presentation, I don't have a lot to say. Just really reflect what on what Neil's just said. There's been a lot more interest in recent years around local government procurement and social value, and I think this puts us in a place where we can have a way of quantifying in a systematic fashion what we achieve, and that's really the benefit I see from taking this approach. But it's not that we haven't been doing things on this, and we've always reported local procurement statistics to Exec Board every quarter, so information has been made available, or some of it's been made available, but being able to really have it all in one place, I think is a great benefit. We can see what we're achieving as we move forward. It'll be clearer for suppliers what we expect from them.
Thank you. Okay, I'll go to questions. Sam.
Thank you very much, Chair. And it's interesting to hear this, how this is going forward, especially in looking at a national level. The government has proposed changing, or is in the process of looking at and investigating how it changed its spending rules to look how gross value added has a lesser impact in terms of potentially more funding for the North, etc. I just wanted to ask, as part of this process, obviously you did mention the various different levels of parts that are going to be assessed as part of the process. Can you just confirm what sort of stabilizers or mitigations are put in place to make sure that for anything that's particularly small, under 100,000, or generally those over 100,000, are not slowed down in the process as a result? Although I do think it's a good initiative, but certainly making sure that it doesn't slow down the process at the same time. Thank you, Chair.
Sasha, do you want to take that one?
Yeah, of course. Thank you, Councillor First. From our experience so far, the process definitely has not slowed down the procurement process. We have very good support. The social value portal team are working very closely with individuals on tenders, so they're ensuring that they're working to timescales. So regarding the procurement kind of timescales, we've slotted the social value part of that into that process, so it's just picked up at the correct part of that tender process, and timescales aren't affected. If there is any kind of discrepancies there, individuals will work very closely with category managers, commissioners, and also the portal to very quickly get over any issues that come up. But like I say, so far it's not been an issue.
Kieran, you wanted to add something?
Yeah, I think it just to sort of say that in terms of the procurement process itself, I think Sasha is absolutely right. I don't think there's any particular impact on that. Tenders are coming back and they're being assessed in sort of usual timeframes. I think there is a degree of sort of upskilling commissioners within the council to understand sort of how the social value portal itself works and how to utilize it. But I think once we get through sort of the first round of these procurements that are going through the portal, that once you've been through it once, that shouldn't be a problem going forward.
Thank you. Do you want to come back, Sam?
Not at that point, Chair, but thanks for the answers.
Thank you. Councillor Midgley.
Thank you, Chair. I'm just interested to know how the team deals with the financial challenges, because obviously some services can be compromised just to bring down the cost of delivery. So I wondered how the team balanced that, getting value for money, making sure that the companies obviously also have the social value criteria as well as cost, because we're under so much pressure financially as a council.
Who wants to take that? Kieran?
As part of the so the social value goes in as part of the procurement process. So I guess given the competitive tension that's there, it's anticipated that bidders will sort of put their best foot forward with regard to social value, and that it's not at any extra cost to the council. and that it's not at any expense of losing part of the actual primary service that we're looking to procure. So it is a case of relying on the fact that we're part of the competition. You're going to be assessed, and it might be sort of 10% of the overall evaluation, could be more than that, and as a consequence, as I say, the anticipation is that tenderers will put their best foot forward, and that they won't that it won't have an impact. It's supposed to be sort of above and beyond what is being procured as the main, the primary purpose of the contract.
Thank you. You all right with that, Morel? Excellent. Matthew.
Thanks, Chair. Kieran and I have had some conversations about procurement before. So, hi, Kieran. I just wondered if you could confirm for me what's the value that the council procures each year? So I recall it was something about 800 million in contracts.
Yeah, external spend is on average around about 800 million pounds a year. That's across sort of capital, HRA, and revenue.
Okay, thank you. Within the appendix, there's an item, I don't know if this is Kieran or Sasha here. It's NT18A, and it mentions about the total amount spent through the contract in specified sub-localities, and then it talks about a list of qualifying areas, and I didn't see the qualifying areas, and I'm trying to understand what that means. Is that if there was a trading estate that was in an area that wasn't of high deprivation, it wouldn't meet the criteria, it wouldn't receive the same weighting as another would?
I'm not sure, to be honest with you. I'm not close enough to the particular TOMs.
Okay.
I don't know, Sasha, if you've got a response on that, or whether it's something we need to take away and come back to you on.
I think it's probably something we need to take away, Kieran, and come back if that's okay.
Okay, we'll come back to you on that.
Yeah, that would be really useful. I think my thinking is on this, that if there's an organisation that's based somewhere and is employing many people who are from disadvantaged backgrounds, it's employing lots of people with apprenticeships, but just because of its postcode, it's in another area, it seems obtuse to try and disadvantage it in the procurement process as we go through. The only final question, Chair, was there's no mention of...
I think in terms of this particular, in terms of all the TOMs, in fact, I think they would be identified on a procurement by procurement basis. So there is some, it's not necessarily that this will be a requirement in every single procurement, but let's take it away, and I can come back to you with a full answer on that.
Perfect, thanks, Kieran. The only final question was about 0 hours contracts. There's no mention of 0 hours contracts and not working with companies or any restrictions on 0 hours contracts in there. I wasn't sure if that was something that was included or covered elsewhere.
I think in that regard, I think we had identified in terms of sort of employment practices of suppliers that was something that was lacking. So Sasha was mentioning earlier that there's a review that's ongoing at the moment of the TOMs. So that's definitely something that we will be picking up.
James.
I was going to say the easiest way around 0 hours contracts is for the government to ban them. It's a government that regulates the labour market, not us as a council. So if the government wants to ban 0 hours contracts, that's the easiest and quickest solution to that problem I can identify, Chair.
Matthew.
I can completely understand where Councillor Lewis is coming from, and I'm sure that he'll be lobbying from that once he's had his promotion to leader of council. But this is something that the council could control and could put in there in its procurement process. Now, whether it chooses to or not is up to the council, I would think.
James?
I've campaigned in many general elections to end 0 hours contracts, and will continue to do so. We, again, as officers have said, it's something we can look at. We sometimes struggle to put things in that are particularly around employment, where there is a national legal standard, which, like I say, that's set by the national government. We'll certainly look at how we can institute a far higher standard than the government thinks is, or the current government thinks is acceptable in the labour market. You don't have to fight me on that one, Councillor Robinson.
Okay, now,
I'm just keen to understand if it's going in the review process. That's all.
I'm sure
We
it
can make
is.
an agenda. Yes, we can put it on there.
Thanks for that. I'm not seeing any more raised hands. Is there any more questions? No, another really interesting read, I thought, when I read the papers yesterday. Okay, so thank you for that. Okay, so we do plan to add social value and promote a whole range of agendas through the procurement thing, which is really, really good. Okay, so thanks for that, Kieran, Sasha. We'll now move on to agenda item 9, which focuses on improving the experience and outcomes of Black, Asian and minority ethnic colleagues in the council. Over the summer, there were obviously significant protests, and the council reacted by instigating a commission that looked at work in the city, artwork in the city. But it's clear that this agenda is about more than just public art, and is about how we as a council can do more for BAME colleagues and to ensure a positive experience working at the council. So Graham, can I hand over to you now to present this report?
Yeah, thanks, Councillor. Hi, everyone.
Hi, Graham, again.
One thing, Graham Sefton from the HR team. And yeah, as Councillor said, they're really important work that we've been doing over the last 7 months in this area. As a council, Leeds City Council employs around 2,000 Black, Asian, minority ethnic colleagues. And over the last 7 months, we've been really working closely alongside those colleagues to understand their experiences, what's been a really, really difficult and challenging year, in terms of all the Black Lives Matters movement, but also the impact of COVID as well. So there was a call to action from our Black, Asian, minority ethnic staff in July of last year for a debate across the organisation, and also some strong action in this area. CLT has been working alongside our network and staff since, and there's been regular contact and meetings to really first and foremost listen to those experiences. And we've successfully done that and issued a joint statement, which I hope you've seen in the report, which gives a strong and ongoing commitment to really address staff's issues and take strong action in this area. It's been accompanied as well by an action plan of important priority work. And once again, you'll see the broad range of different things that we're doing, on the back of hearing those experiences from staff. And that covers a wide range of things, whether it's some corporate change we need to make, for example, to our recruitment and grievance processes, or whether that is some local level action, which our directors and service managers and managers right across the council have been leading. The importance of those conversations at local level is really key to this, because we know, across those 2,000 colleagues, there's such a broad range of diversity, wonderful, rich, diverse BAME community that we've got, and it's not right and proper that we put all of those people into one homogenous group. So we'll listen very much to individual experiences. You've seen there the plan. The network has come forward with some proposals around longer term planning for 2021 and 22. We're gonna include in that thinking some further feedback we'll get from a really important survey of all BAME colleagues across the council. The results from that are due in February, and we hope to be able to share them with you as they're available. I think one thing just to finish is before I take questions is to just reiterate the really important point about this is a real team lead effort, and it's not just something for Black, Asian, minority ethnic staff to take forward. These are all issues and challenges that everyone in the council owns and has got a really important part to play to make a difference. Happy to take any questions on the content of the report.
Absolutely, I love that expression, team leads. I'm not seeing any hands. Any questions? Go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks, Graham. Really good report. It was very interesting, obviously, reading through the report and then the independent inquiries being carried out and so on into various aspects in terms of health inequalities and all that. I mean, obviously, it would be an understatement to say that it wouldn't be an understatement to say that 2020 was an exceptionally challenging year and an extraordinary year, especially vis-a-vis health and so on. And we've seen it on media and various other sources as well with regards to the disproportionate, if you like, BAME kind of exposure to some of the issues that we have, and part of that has to do with, if you like, deprivation and other issues as well. However, coming back to the subject, it was really interesting, and thank you. You touched it that basically it's not just for the BAME communities only. It should encompass the wider workforce. In terms of Leeds City Council. But vis-a-vis the recommendations, the report, the recommendations that have been sort of given by the Harrogate and Leeds and Harrogate Health Authority, I think some are really interesting, and part of it is the health inequalities vis-a-vis mental health, maternity care, levels of provision, and also access to safe work. Now, obviously, we do cover lots of issues like that in our Best Council plan and strategy that we've got, and the workforce strategy. But I'd be particularly interested to be updated, first of all, on a couple of things. First of all, updates and outcomes from staff and workforce surveys, if they're carried out, especially with regards to this particular report. And also, I'd like to see more input from the unions as well, in terms of an involvement of the unions as well, in terms of the health of workforce and all that. So I'd like to see that. But generally, thank you very much. An excellent report. I'm really happy to read it, and I'd like to get more regular updates as well, because obviously things are changing quite rapidly. Some of the stuff that you've mentioned is more general, in terms of how you're dealing with these. But I'd like to know more specifics of this as well. That would be very interesting to me. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Goha. Graham, do you want to
say
anything at this stage?
Just say, Councillor, I'm more than happy to share the results that we received from the staff survey, which will be due probably later this month, and that will really give us a good insight, I think, around the experience of people at a really detailed level. On the input from the trade unions, we have worked really closely with them throughout COVID, on all of these issues around response to COVID, safe access to safe working environments, and we continue to have conversations with them around that. And one of the really good examples, I think, of where we've worked closely with the network and colleagues over the last few months is around the risk assessments, individual risk assessments with around COVID for people at work. We put a framework in place by talking with our Black, Asian, minority ethnic colleagues over a protracted period of time, and that's been heralded by them and the network as a real success.
Thank you, Graham. Okay, I've got Di, then Matt, and then David. So Di.
Thanks, Chair. It's just a quick comment, really, or question. Have you looked at reverse mentoring so that senior leaders or senior managers are mentored by someone from the BAME community or from any other diversity network? It helps give a deeper understanding of the issues that people do experience on a day-to-day basis. I think it's easy to see. You can sort of have a helicopter view. We all have a view on what's happening or what's not happening, but to really get in there, reverse mentoring is an option.
Yeah, yes, Councillor, that's something that we do, and we've got some good success stories around that, and we've done that for quite a while. And last year, for example, we tried to match up our senior leaders with members of our staff networks, not just from the Black, Asian, minority ethnic network, but right across all of our staff networks. And I know that's something that our BAME staff network is keen to do again, you know, to establish some new relationships given everything that's happened. So yes, very much we do that.
Good. Okay, thank you.
Matthew.
Thanks, Chair. Graham and I have spoken before about the anonymised. Hi, Graham. Sorry, morning. We've spoken about the anonymised recruitment and selection process, and I've seen cases where this has worked really, really well. And I'm a fan of taking this forward. I wondered if we had any sort of dates for when that might be pursued, and or if it's going to be rolled out as a pilot first, or it's going out across the council.
So there's a number of things, Councillor, that we've done around the recruitment. So we've looked at things like the inclusion, the different people that sit on our panels and how inclusive that is. We've looked at some of the things around the training, the inclusion training that we provide to those panel members. And the third one that you rightly mentioned there is around trying to anonymise the shortlisting process. It's something we've got a call out to our system provider. We have a recruitment system in the council, and we're currently in conversation with that provider to see how we can build in anonymised shortlisting into the product that we use. So that conversation is happening at the moment, and we're just waiting for a return from them about how quickly we'll be able to do that. And once I know, I'll let you know what our estimated implementation is.
That's really useful. Thank you. I wonder if you've also got the statistics on the number of complaints that the council has had internally of where racism has been cited. So that would be staff on staff, and if there's the number of, and the same thing for externally. So where, you know, there might have been racial abuse of an officer from a member of the public as well. And are we seeing those trends going up, or what do they look like?
I think we've talked about this before, haven't we, Councillor? And I've tried to provide some data around that from our complaints process team and also from teams in adult social care. I'll have to check the numbers though, Councillor Robinson, about what they were, because since Christmas when we provided them, I need to revisit that and have a look at some of those figures for you. So can I come back to you on that, please?
Please, if you would you come back to the board, because I think the board would find it really useful as well when considering this item and how it takes things forward in the future. Thank you.
Thanks for that, Matthew. I've got Councillor Jenkins and then Sam.
Hi, a question, just a comment really for Graham. I'm often concerned about the people with disabilities in the BAME community and people with learning disabilities as well. And often they may get missed out on surveys. So I just wondered if that's possible, if it's possible to try and incorporate their views, and also to make sure that vaccinations for COVID are put as a high priority for the BAME community as a whole, but also particularly for people with disabilities and in the learning disability area. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Graham?
Yeah, so with all the surveys that we do, whether it's the staff survey, wellbeing survey, and the more recent survey to BAME colleagues, we can also get a view around you know, the different characteristics that people have. So in terms of being BAME and disabled, you know, we'll be able to get that picture as part of our overall report. And so once that's available, I'll be able to share that view. It's a really important point, Councillor. Thanks.
Thank you. All right, David. You're on mute. Sam.
Thank you, Chair. Really interesting discussion so far, and I just wanted to bring in a little bit more about the anonymisation process in relation to applications, because I know it's certainly been a hot topic as somebody who's been in the recruitment world for a few years, up until last year. I just want to ask what nature of anonymisation would be. Is it just staying in relation to racial, or is it, can you just explain a little bit more about what that involves, what extent it goes to, really, just to explain a bit more? Thank you.
That's the bit we're just working through at the moment, Councillor Firth. So in terms of how we'd anonymise, what information we'd not disclose, and even some of the pros and cons, around doing that. So we're in that stage at the moment where we're looking at all the research, that are from the recruitment industry, what other organisations do, and we'll come up with a position, around that for the council. We've started the conversations early around, can we build it into the system, because we know often it takes a while to introduce some of these changes. So at the same time as forming our view around how the anonymised shortlisting would work, we're also just checking that system potential for change too.
Sam?
Thank you for that, Graham. Look forward to hearing that in due course, and I think certainly it's something for us to look at in the future as the wider recruitment process, and maybe actually bring the chair of the network in, even the lead member for the situation as well, or for the various different whatever, because the various different minority groups that obviously we have in the administration. And the reason why is simply because I just want to hear what people's views are. I think the biggest thing is that certainly there is certainly a definite need from anything from removing somebody's name to other potential biases that could take a part. But I think that certainly there is an active debate on what shouldn't be involved, and that includes things like university, degree course, and things like that. And it's certainly going to be interesting to see what you come back. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thanks. Any final comments there? I'm not seeing any more hands. Any final comments there, Graham?
No, I'm fine. Thanks, Councillor.
Oh, lovely. Thank you. Thank you for coming. So, yeah, another good discussion. And of course, we're all fully committed to this agenda, and it's important that as an organisation we react when our staff networks speak out. So it's good to see this report and the response made so far from the CLT. So I look forward to more of this over the next 12 months, and it'd be great to have some regular updates as to how this is moving forward. But thank you, Graham. Thanks for coming. Okay, I'll now move on to item 10, which is the third report on agile working and estate realisation, following reports that came to our November and January meetings. This is very much an evolving issue, and though we are already on our third report, I think we could add a fourth looking at how technology can support new ways of working and how staff operate in the years to come. I also think that we need to allow time for some of the ideas to be fully developed before we formulate our views and make any recommendations. Though I will take on board members' comments as we discuss this item. So today's item has a focus on buildings and the wider estate, and begins to give a clearer picture of how staff may work in the future. It's an excellent report. Mark and I think Angela's going to add something in as well. So can Mark, do you want to take it away?
Yes, thank you, Councillor Harland, and good morning, everyone. Yeah, and I am joined this morning by Angela Barnacle, who's the Chief Officer for Asset Management and Regeneration, who will be able to add as we move through the paper. I think, Councillor Harland, you gave a really good introduction there, which sets the journey that we've been on, and certainly the discussions at this this board to this point. I think probably just worth reminding the board members around the context that we're working in here, and certainly estate rationalisation and changes to our estate is something that we've been working through. It's constant evolution, and something that certainly up to the pandemic starting last year was something that was being driven through the Changing the Workplace programme, and what we'd found even at that point was that there were times that we had substantial underutilization of the estate that we'd got, and we'd got huge numbers of desks within our core buildings, which at certain points in the week, mainly beginning and end of the week, were underutilized, and then clearly the pandemic hit, and that was really an acceleration of some of the trends that we've seen. And at the point of March last year, year where we went into lockdown, we did an extensive piece of work to review the buildings that we had as operational, how we close those down in response to the lockdown period, and out of the 200 key buildings that we've got as an organisation, about 80 were closed at that point. And then as we've moved through the course of the last year, as the first lockdown was released, and as we've adjusted to the pandemic, those buildings that we did open as part of our core estate to allow some services to resume from a physical base, but also for office-based staff to be able to return back into to buildings for a wide variety of reasons. We had to, working with colleagues in facilities management, deliver a COVID secure approach to those buildings, which obviously respected social distancing, limited the capacity, and made sure that in general they were being used in a safe way, and that allowed the introduction of about 1,000 desks in our the buildings that we've now got open. And I think that's been really a point that has then allowed us to start thinking about what the future of the estate is. And as Councillor Harland outlined in her introduction, that this isn't just an estate matter. This is very much how we work, how we use technology, how services are provided, and the estate needs to facilitate and respond to each of those factors. So as we set out in the November report to Scrutiny Board, and as Graham Sefton outlined in the report in January, there was a staff survey undertaken in summer last year, which really highlighted the fact that certainly the vast majority of staff wanted to work from home for at least half of their working week. About 80% of people wanted to work from home for more than half of their working week. But also that around 50% of staff wanted to work from home on a more permanent basis, and that I suppose associated with the service reviews that have been undertaken and the changes that we've seen in terms of services having to rapidly readjust to how they deliver, and the building not necessarily being the physical focus of that delivery, has really started to allow us to think about what our estate looks like in the future. And clearly a lot of that work, as Graham's outlined previously, will involve more engagement with staff to further understand how they want to use our estate. But as the report that you've got in front of you today outlines, we have certainly identified a number of key principles and drivers that we're going to use to really guide that in the future. So you know, from an estate perspective, we obviously have to look at how people are working, the way services are delivered, but acknowledging the financial pressures that we've got, and certainly in terms of the estate that we've got about £27 million of building operating costs, and that just puts into context the importance of us really looking at the estate as a means of trying to support the council's financial position moving forward, but then also the climate emergency and the need for us, as we've talked about previously at this Scrutiny Board, the need for us to use our estate and invest in our estate in an appropriate way to reduce the council's carbon footprint, but also utilise the estate in such a way that it's not just the carbon emissions from resulting from the buildings, but also the way in which staff work and the reducing travel demand, etc., and therefore how the estate can respond to that. As the paper sets out, we've identified some key principles that we need to work to moving forward, and they're really around the need, and this has come very strongly through the staff engagement work, that actually teams want to come together in space. And that could take a variety of forms, and and it could be around collaboration, it could be about desk-based work, but nevertheless, the fact that the team is the destination point, and clearly the buildings need to facilitate that in one way, shape or form. Collaboration space is another key area, and I think acknowledging that a lot of people, a lot of staff can do desk-based activities in a more agile way, working from home. The staff survey indicated that staff really wanted to use the buildings for much more collaborative working, and therefore that's probably not in a formal meeting room context. That can be in a variety of spaces, and actually collaboration probably means different things to different people. So actually creation of flexibility around the spaces, the type of furniture used, and so on, will really help to allow staff to work in very different ways, and like I say, use the buildings much more for collaboration. Geographical choice is another key element, and I suppose this underpins a lot of our work around looking at how the estate can be used more flexibly, addressing that point around reducing travel demand, not just for commuting purposes, but also for in-work travelling, but allowing, I suppose, us to be able to utilise our buildings in a much more flexible way, but increasing that utilisation. So actually looking at not just our office buildings, but our wider estate, how we can maybe use some underutilised spaces in museums, leisure centres, maybe children's centres or community centres, and use those in different ways that helps us sustain the buildings that we are retaining, but also rationalise other buildings in those localities. But ultimately provide that overall ability for staff to work much more flexibly across the city, to undertake their work in a more effective way. And I suppose the final point, and it underpins all of that, is around the ability to book desks and spaces, and I think it's becoming clear that in the future we're all going to probably have to be a bit more deliberate about what we're doing. So in terms of if we want to go into a building to work at a desk or to occupy some space, that actually to make sure that we are have that access. Clearly we need to book it and make sure that it's there at the time we want it for the number of people that we want to bring to those spaces. And there's already been a lot of good work undertaken by colleagues in DIS to establish a desk booking system, which has really been driven by the need to ensure our COVID secure buildings in the first instance, and to support track and trace. But that has the ability of being able to be rolled out across our estate to support that booking. And I suppose clearly, as I said earlier, one of the key drivers to this is about looking at which buildings are the most appropriate for us to retain on a long-term basis, where we should prioritise investment, and we've done a lot of work over the course of the last 9 months, really, to look at how we can reduce our estate, the buildings that we should focus on, and attached to the report is a schedule of properties that are identified as our retained buildings at this point in time, as well as a phasing plan as to how we are thinking at this point around how we will upgrade some of those spaces, remodel some of those spaces to fit the way in which we're going to be working in the future. I think, as you said, Councillor Harland, it is very much work in progress. The response that the estate makes and has is constantly evolving in light of how we change as an organisation, how we change in the way that services are delivered, and the way that people work. And so this is very much a point on the journey, and I think there's certainly a lot of beneficial work taking place between ourselves, HR, and DIS to really bring this agenda together. So over time that will and over the coming months, that will be really carefully designed through. But I think that one of the key points probably to note is that the data around our estate is absolutely key, and I think in terms of how we will develop the offer of the estate moving forward, it will be very much founded on how the data that we obtain about its usage, how people react to the new spaces that have been created, and so on. So I hope that's a good summary of the paper at the outset. Is there anything you want to add, Angela, at this point?
I think that was really comprehensive, Mark. The only thing I would add is that we do expect restrictions in terms of pandemic restrictions to last certainly for the rest of this year, which will certainly influence how we occupy and return to our estate as restrictions are eased.
Thank you. Yep, very comprehensive, Mark, report and your verbal summary. Sam, you had your hand up, but it's gone down.
I put it down because my question was answered, because Mark, as ever, was extremely comprehensive and hit the nail on the head. But I do want to just say one general point, which is that certainly let's hope that this programme, although I think that certainly in the summer of last year, the general view was 80% of staff were saying that they would like to work from home. I do welcome the idea that that is limited, or it's not expected to exceed 2 days a week, because I do think that certainly we may feel a little bit different. It'll be interesting to see what the results of surveys come out now, because I certainly would say one thing. I think that certainly more and more people, especially as the vaccine has come in, and I'm not trying to make a political point, I'm just saying generally, as it looks to see that there is a horizon available for us to leap towards, hopefully, that we don't jump before the horse has bolted and look to, obviously it may help Councillor Lewis sort out his accounts in the coming years in looking at office space being limited and cut down. I think that certainly we need to make sure that we do look to the future and also make sure that we don't jump before we actually realize what it's going to look like. It's going to be totally different, but I think that certainly, I think there was certainly a honeymoon period in the early period of the lockdown that might have then felt that more people wanted to work from home, but hopefully we will be in a position where people can work in the office. And I don't want to see a situation where we are effectively scrabbling around for people to work in and around our estate across the city, rather than actually having the collaborative joined up working that actually does bring a totally different aspect to the way in which people are able to do things and the projects and the success of the council. But otherwise than that, that's my general comments. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Sam. I think you're absolutely right about, we had a glorious summer, and you speak to more people now and they are less enthusiastic, shall we say, about working from home. And, if it's part of the general well-being of outside stimulus and bouncing things off your work colleagues, and just that we're social animals at the end of the day, and I think striking that balance is vital, absolutely vital. But we are looking at we're in good hands with Mark and his team and Angela, so I'll take some more questions. Peter.
Thanks, Chair. It kind of comes on from that point anyway, because I thought there is quite a good balance in some of the bits around this, because I think I previously talked about the use of community hubs and other facilities, which we want to continue to invest in as much as we can and keep. And it's good that I think there's points in here around, certainly you may want to go into the city centre for a couple of days a week or whatever to be able to be with your colleagues, but many of us with young children at home would also like to nip into a nearby location for a bit of peace and quiet every now and then, which so I tend to go to Pudsey Library and do my work in there, and I think that's really good. So I think that ability to allow people to reduce travel, because it seems a bit silly me driving 6 miles just for a bit of peace and quiet, should we say, but the opportunity to cycle up to Pudsey and use that office is really good. So I think that's really positive. And as well, I think there's a real benefit in that obviously we do need to try and keep our city centre going in what's going to be a tough time, and to have employees going in there, but there'll also be a bit of a struggle for some of our district centres as well. So while people are staying somewhat locally and helping local businesses for some of the time, they can also then go into the city centre and make sure we've got a balance of that. I wanted to bring up just one point then around it, which was on the disposal of buildings, because the one important point we made up on that is that when the council disposes of buildings, obviously we're doing so in a way to seek to reduce the climate impact of our estate, and it's important that when we remove them, as we've said previously, that we don't just pass them on to somebody else in a state at which we wouldn't have used them ourselves. So it'd be interesting just to see if there's any further thoughts on that. So when we're disposing of a building, how we're working to ensure that it isn't still having the climate impact it was, that we ourselves may have regarded as negative.
Before I bring Mark or Angela back in, James, did you want to say something?
Thanks, Chair. A couple of points. I think, you know, in terms of Councillor Carlisle's last point around the buildings, I mean, sometimes there's some of the buildings we are selling almost at their land value with an expectation that somebody taking them on will flatten the site and rebuild on that site. So it's not always that a building in situ will be rebuilt. So the we had a former council building near me in Kippocks, and it was a single-storey building. It was sold, and the first thing that the person that brought it did was turn it into a dormer bungalow, obviously with a new roof on. So sometimes, you know, that these are costs that, or expectation that the building won't continue in the use it was with the council, and again, those costs should be picked up by the person taking them on. Like I say, some of them are sold as, I mean, virtually derelict or empty sites. So I think it is an important point, but sometimes, like I say, there's an expectation there'll be a change of use, and it'll be the purchaser who will, particularly where we're selling buildings, who will take it on. Obviously, there's requirements when we lease buildings. There's requirements around their energy performance before we can re-let buildings. The main point I was going to make is coming back to Councillor Firth, and I think one of the issues that you know has been driving this is actually we're going to have, you know, because of 10 years of grinding austerity and having to shoulder the costs of COVID. I'm not making a political point here. We're going to have a lot less staff as a council. So some of these changes aren't about expecting the staff to have to work differently. It is simply we're going to be a smaller organisation because we have less money. Some of this work, I have to say, to be on a more positive point, some of this work started before lockdown, and it was around particularly those staff who, for part of their work, and it can be in a whole range of areas, whether it's asset management, looking at property, or some of our social care services, visiting people, you know, and we have a lot of staff that make visits during the course of the day, and if we can provide them the technology and the resources that they can start the working day at home rather than commuting into an office, picking up work and then making their visits, you know, we can look at reducing people need to travel. That's really important as well, and that's something I don't want to lose. But again, it is, you know, picking up the work from the surveys. And there's I don't know if Graham, I think Graham Sefton, I think he's left the call. He's left the call now. But as Graham said on the,
I'm still here, Councillor.
Say again. Are you still there, Graham?
Yep.
Oh, brilliant. Well, you can explain it better than me, but obviously, you know, as members have said, you know, the surveys we had after 2 months of lockdown were a bit different in terms of responses, and perhaps the surveys we're having after 11 months of lockdown, and that sort of information feeding back into how some of the ways we work is important as well, and to make sure we are sort of supporting staff, first of all, supporting staff so that they're able to make choices, but also, again, making sure we're able to get the people we need in the right places to deliver the services we need, and that's an important part. And I think at this point in time, we don't have an exact answer on all of that, and some of this is going to be an evolving process. I think all of us involved in this recognise that as well.
Graham, do you want to add anything?
Yeah, I think all really valuable points have been made there, and just to let everyone know, over the next couple of months, we're going to do a lot of engagement with staff again, you know, repeat surveys, have conversations on one-to-one and team levels to really understand, how that last 9 months has affected people and how it made a difference to their attitude and preferences, whilst at the same time, obviously balancing that versus service need and what the organisation can do in terms of its estate. So yeah, that next couple of months are important to revisit that and get a really clearer picture.
Thanks, Graham. Mark, have you anything to add at that point?
Yeah, I suppose just a couple of points in response to Councillor Carl's questions. I think on that point around the future use of buildings or sites, and as Councillor Lewis has said, in many cases the building that we're coming out of has come to the end of its useful life, and as such redevelopment is more than likely the way forward. But where people are bringing forward changes to buildings or new developments, that's obviously part of the planning process and building regulations as well, which will support that climate agenda and requirement for certain standards to be met. I think the other point raised was around the viability and vitality of both the city centre and local centres, and I think that's something that has been very much at the forefront of our minds as we've been thinking about our estate. And actually, yes, it is important that we're bringing people into the city centre to support the businesses that are there. But actually, there's a real opportunity for us to further boost local and district centres as we bring more staff, or the ability for more staff to transition through those buildings, whether it's just for an ad hoc meeting or whether it's to actually touch down. There's an opportunity there for staff to then use some of those local businesses, whether it just to be for a coffee or a sandwich or whatever it might be. But actually, there's a real regeneration opportunity that could emerge as a result of our estate decisions. And I just wanted to really reassure the board that is something that is purposeful in our thinking. It's not just a consequence of it.
Thank you, Mark. Matthew.
Thanks, Chair. I just wanted to seek some clarification from Mark and Graham, if that was okay. One of the questions I wanted to ask was about the timescales that are set out. For some of the buildings, it's summer 2022, and the drivers for this, I'm trying to understand the drivers for this COVID or the drivers for this the estate realisation, because obviously by summer 2022, it's 18 months away. We might be in a very, very different place than we are now. So what's the resilience in the model that's being built to understand this and how we can adapt? The second question is picking up on what Councillor Carl's mentioned about the city centre but district centres as well. The report, I think, identifies that a lot of people would correctly work from home Mondays and Fridays. I think that's in there. And then I looked at Merion, and Merion's capacity pre-COVID to post-COVID is less than half. I think it's about 40% that's there. That could place a lot of pressure on some big buildings like Merion, where people want to all be in at the same time, and the knock-on that has on the supply chain as well, and the businesses around, as you mentioned, the coffee shops, the places that sell a sandwich, all the other businesses. We wanted to try and get the high street going again. What's the feedback? And linked to that, not all of our officers will live in Leeds. Some, wish they did, but some of them will be living in other localities. And similarly, officers from other local authorities will be living in Leeds. And it's trying to understand that mapping, and if this is being done by our West Yorkshire and North Yorkshire colleagues too, and what the feedback they're receiving.
Thank you for that. Matthew, let's hope we are in a completely different place 18 months down the line.
Everything crossed, yeah.
That can be crossed is crossed. Okay, Mark, do you want to go first?
Yeah, okay. So I think it is an important point around the phasing, and I think there are two factors at play here. One is about having a sustainable estate, a financially sustainable estate in the future, and the second is responding to the pandemic, and then obviously the changes that we'll see in the way that people work and services are delivered. In terms of the phasing that we've set out, I think essentially it's recognising that this to do this properly will require some investment, and clearly that while a small amount of investment can be achieved, what we can't do is be spending millions on day one to get this right. And equally, because we're in that changing world and trying to really understand how staff are wanting to work, how staff are wanting to use these new spaces, what we don't want to be doing is ploughing a lot of investment in something that may not actually be completely fit for purpose in a year's time, say. So what we're doing, working very closely with colleagues in facilities management, is starting to roll out some of these spaces on a prototype basis, effectively, whereby we're using furniture from around the estate that we've already got, reconfiguring the spaces, and then through some of that consultation work that Graham has outlined, we can then gauge the extent to which they're fit for purpose, or the changes that we might need to make further, and then also looking at how we might need to then bring some investment into new furniture and technology to make those spaces most effective. And I think again, some of this phasing is recognising that the furniture is only one element, and actually it is about how people use the spaces and the technology that we put into those spaces. And there's in parallel to the discussions we're having about the buildings, we're working with colleagues in DIS to really look at what those spaces may require in terms of technology, and also the basic principles that we need to be giving to people around how they may, for example, dial into meetings. I think hybrid meetings is absolutely one of those key points where actually you may have a group of people in a place, in a room or in a space together, but then you may have the same number of people or even more accessing that meeting remotely. So again, this is where we need to make sure that those spaces are fit for purpose to allow that to happen, and thinking much more widely around not just, again, that technology, but actually how do you get the right acoustics for those meetings to take place. And I think you'll all probably recognise that from days gone by that there's some meetings that are just very difficult when you are in a meeting room with poor acoustics and you're trying to access them online. So I think that's the phasing point. In terms of the capacities that you're referring to, Councillor Robinson, which is set out in Appendix 2, it must be said they are the final column there, which refers to the 1,077 desk capacity. That is based on COVID secure standards. So that's based on 2 metre social distance. And as you say, hopefully, while we don't anticipate that probably social distancing will probably reduce from that over the course of the current year, looking to the future, you would hope that we'll be in a slightly different place, and that actually, rather than occupying one in every 3 desks as it's working out there, that actually every one of the desks that are retained within those the parts of the office spaces that are that do have traditional desks will be able to be used. I think what is probably worth saying, which I didn't outline in my summary, was that we are looking as a working basis, we're looking at about 60% of the floor space being transitioned over to collaborative spaces of different types, with about 40% of the space being traditional desk space. I suppose again that links back to the phasing. This is not just a little tweak around. This in some cases will be quite a substantial change. So I think rather than us getting very focused on what a desk capacity is, I think we've got to look at an overall building, and actually in some of those collaborative spaces, the capacity and the density could be far greater than we've had historically. So, you know, take example a bistro table with 4 chairs around it probably takes the same amount of space as 2 desks, and so actually having that capacity, and I think again it comes back to Councillor Firth's earlier point about us having that wider ability to accommodate people in the estate. That's something that's going to very much feature into it in terms of that overall capacity that we might have.
Thank you, Mark. Another comprehensive response. Graham, do you want to add anything?
Sorry, no, Councillor, I'm fine at this point. Thanks.
All right, thank you. Are you all right with that, Matthew?
Yeah, that's fine. Thank you, Chair. And I guess working from home will end the bring your child to work day or bring your dog to work day policies of some places as well.
Okay, Councillor Firth.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to come back on a couple of points, really, just for a couple of clarifications further just to the debate. Councillor Lewis mentioned about the situation of the earlier leaver scheme, etc. I just wanted to ask if we had any further details on really, or if that could be brought back to the board at another time, how many of those were actually mainly desk-based roles in particular, just to really understand that. And also, as well as that, it would be interesting probably later down the line to understand how many of those buildings, because I know it's something that a lot of members are interested in this board, how many of those buildings that potentially we would look to be disposing of would be heritage buildings or potentially buildings of significant interest to the city. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Mark?
Okay, I'll have to defer to colleagues in HR around the ELI scheme, and if we've not got that information now, we can certainly see what we can bring back separately. The point about heritage buildings is one that we've discussed, I think, at this board previously, and I think there's a clear recognition that we have to treat buildings that are sensitive locally in an appropriate way and understand what those sensitivities are. That's not to say that they can't be disposed, because actually in some cases having a sort of the investment being brought forward by a new owner may well actually provide a longer term sustainable position, more sustainable position for that building. But equally in some cases it may be that we have to look at how we can reimagine that building with the council as owners, and how that building may, while it may not serve our purposes entirely as an organisation and provide that modern way of working, actually what other opportunities can it provide us with, whether that be working with partners, which is something that was raised earlier actually around our other authorities doing this, and could we provide or other organisations and providing space on a more flexible basis, working with partners, but also whether there's any other community desires or needs. So I think it's recognising that each building needs to be of a heritage nature, certainly needs to be approached on its own merits, and it's not a one size fits all, but there's a variety of tools within our toolkit that we might employ around them.
Thanks, Mark. Graham, have you got anything to add?
No, just to say on the ELIs, what I'll do is get a breakdown by role, and that will give us an indication of the number at desk-based more traditionally. So I'll come back to you with that.
Brilliant, thank you. You all right with that, Sam? Okay, Di.
Thanks, Chair. Just a couple of comments. Where some of these community hubs are quite small and already well used in normal times, will we look at other buildings in the area? If you're going to create collaborative space, that will take away from the public space potentially, would it? And if so, do we need to look at bigger buildings in some cases? And then just on the heritage side, we do keep talking about it and how we need to treat them sympathetically and get local views. but I'm not seeing much movement on the one in our area anyway, and it would be nice to see something happening.
I think we all know which one you're referring to, Di.
I'm sure we all know which one I'm referring to. It's my favourite topic of conversation.
Mark?
Yeah, okay. So I think that there's a general point around community hubs, which is, yes, they have become a very important part of our estate and the services that are provided. But equally, the pandemic and the way that people have accessed services has changed, and there's been a lot more drive to online provision. And in time, that may well, and I'm not trying to presume anything here, but it may well change the way in which some of those community hub buildings need to be used, or the spaces or the services that may be accessed online versus in place. So I think that's something that will need to be reviewed and considered in line with the approach that we take then with our other spaces for our staff that we want to create. In terms of your specific point around the Rothwell site, possibly one for us to have a conversation with outside of the meeting, but as you know, Councillor Chapman, we have been open to proposals coming forward from the community, and I think obviously with the pandemic, one of the questions that we've asked back is whether the proposals previously put forward are still valid. So certainly something that we can pick up offline.
Excellent. Okay, I'm not seeing any more hands raised, so thank you all for that. As I've said previously, these are the really important issues. The conversation today has been really informative, very interesting, but it's vital that we get going forward, we get this right for all concerned. So thank you to all our guests for providing those answers and comments, and as always, as I said, very interesting and very informative. So you're now free to go before we move on to our work schedule. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
See you again.
See you all later. Bye now.
Yes,
bye. Okay, Rob, is it over to you?
Yep, thank you, Chair. Yeah, so we have a couple of items slated for next time, one on council tax and business rates, which has been before. There's a possibility, I think, with that one, with it being the end of the financial year, that we also bring the financial health report from Exec Board to go with it. That would make sense, I think. And then, in addition, there's the continuation of this inquiry. I'm in discussion with DIS colleagues about coming along the lines that Mark Mills set out earlier around getting their view of how they can contribute to this agenda. They haven't confirmed that yet, so if that weren't to happen, then probably a summary report from me would come, where explaining where we've got to after 3 reports, and perhaps getting views of members as to how we move that forward and what agreements we have in terms of recommendations. So certainly those 2 would be the items that are coming forward next time. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Rob. Obviously, things may change with the incoming of a new chair, but I'd just like to say at this point, thank you to officers and to members for your support in my tenure in here. I shall miss you all, but I hope to see you. But again, as I say, thank you very much for making my scrutiny time a very enjoyable time. Matthew.
I think all members would probably join me in not just thanking you, Chair, for your role over the last few years in chairing this board, but also in adding our congratulations to you on getting the role at the Exec Board, and hopefully Rob can have it then put on record. And then, without sounding awful, do we know when the new chair gets confirmed?
Thanks a lot, Mary. Next bus, move along. I've no idea. It will be decided next week, I think. Sam. Thank you for those comments, Matthew.
Well, I was just going to say exactly the same as Matthew, but I'm glad that he said it. But I think the biggest thing I can say is to both, obviously, maybe not to Helen, obviously in her particular role, but Mary will probably see you back at the board. And so as a result,
don't sound so gleeful at that thought, Councillor Firth.
Look forward to being skewered. But there we go. But no, wish you all the best of luck. But certainly look forward to seeing you in another capacity. But I was going to ask, do we know who's going to replace you?
No, not yet.
So we'll start taking lots, me and Matt, for the next few.
Okay. Thank you very much. Helen, do you want to say anything?
Just that I've really, this is the board that I started on when I first got elected, when Kim was
oh yeah,
chairing. Yeah, so as a newbie, like you know, and Jim was on it there, and he gave me such great advice. And I've loved my time on Scrutiny, both on this board and my health board, which I'm going to like really, you know, find it hard to let go of. But yeah, it's new and exciting times, a little bit daunting, a little bit nervous, but I've loved being on this board. And Mary, you've been a fantastic chair. So yeah, and I've love working with all of.
It's a good board.
It is.
Good people. Not wrong with good folk.
And thank you for letting me say something, because last week it wasn't common knowledge, it wasn't made public at my board, so I actually did my last Scrutiny board without being able to say anything.
Yeah, and again, apologies, no buns, but I will make up. When I'm in front of your in my other role, I'll bring cakes.
Budget Day 2022.
I do think I'm a bit of a feeder, you know. I think I'm one of those. No, you have that. Sorry, Jim. You wanted to say something, Jim?
No, Chair, I was just clapping, but thank you for all your help. I've really enjoyed your chairship, and we shall watch you very closely in your new role. I'm sure you'll bring credit to it. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Okay, folks, your next meeting is the 22nd of March. I might just pop in and observe, but at 10 a.m, the usual, but thank you again. Take care and hope to see you all in the flesh very soon.
Yeah.
Fingers crossed.